super thin skin, held up longer than I was falling.
Welcome to Center Stage, the documentary podcast. Each week, our group of intrepid researchers and music archivists dig through the record crates of the world, looking for that one artist to take center stage. Using a patent-pending algorithm and spirited debate, we pick one artist. Once that is settled, we invite that artist into Thunderlove Studio to chat with your hosts Keith R. Higgins and Jeff Calhoun. When we're lucky, they say yes. Our mission with Center Stage is simple: to make sure the recorded work of artists remains, or in some cases lands on, the cultural radar. We invite you to sit back and relax. Thank you for joining us.
Summer's in your heart, and I know that you're staying. Taking a ride, but it feels like you're paying for the madness that occurred with the ticket to good times. Hunter promised this, but he wasn't ready for the first time. Standing with my friends in the bright light, saw you going crazy on the dance floor. I've taken on already, but I want more. This time I wanna feel it. Breakfast in New York, and I know that we're dreaming. Drunken conversations and the things we were scheming together.
The half-life of a good band is decades. For a great band, even longer. And Oppenheimer is a great band. The duo's 3 albums helped shape a genre and define a specific sound. Dialing in from Belfast, Ireland, we were lucky to have Oppenheimer's Rocky O'Reilly in Thunderlove Studio to talk about the albums, the band's career, and their legendary sound man. Here's our conversation with Rocky.
I've moved studios a couple of weeks ago, so I've built a mix room in my house. So this is one of the very first few times I've been chatting from it.
I feel lucky. We feel lucky.
You have a separate board for mixing? You got a separate room for tracking and mixing?
Yeah, I've had that for a long time, and then it changed just at the end of January. It was less than ideal, and it was very quick, but we had to move out of our mix room. So I have a really nice old mixing desk, so it's gone into my tracking room, and I've built this little mix synth dreamland at home so that I can just keep writing and playing on stuff and working on things as and when. And it's been really nice. Actually, it's quite liberating.
Good. Well, Rocky O'Reilly, welcome to Center Stage. Thank you for taking the time to do this with us.
Thanks for asking me.
Yeah. I'm going to go right out of the gate with the question I think a lot of people are going to wonder about, and that's the name of the band.
Okay.
Because a lot of people are going to think, oh, Oppenheimer. It's named after, well, now the movie, but it was named after the nuclear physicist. And if I understand correctly, not the case.
Neither. Like most of the things we've ever done, no good reasoning behind it. Just we were just really taken with a lot of kind of synth music and krautrock and lots of kind of electronica from Europe, and we just liked the sound of the word. It was as simple as that. And I think at that point, a lot of bands, especially over here in Ireland and the UK, were called the something. So we just wanted one word. And we wanted it to feel, just like a bit of an escape from Belfast, I guess. And then, obviously the scientist and now the movie have popped us back up in a lot of people's minds.
Oh, good. It's actually worked to your advantage.
It has.
That's awesome. I want to ask you about one thing I read about a venue in Brooklyn, New York. I read an interview. You said your favorite venue to play was Union Hall in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
I also love that venue. What do you love about it?
It's just so like it's so tight and intimate. I'm not even sure, is that venue actually underground, or do you go up? It is underground. It feels underground. I wasn't sure if it was actually just at ground level, but it feels underground. So it has that, absolute. And then those are my favorite venues. I think the ones where like absolute immersion. The outside world is gone, and I think for someone from Belfast in Ireland, just Brooklyn alone is cool enough to be in, but to then just be in that space and some of the shows that we got to play there. I think we might have played there on my 21st or 22nd birthday. So which was maybe our second ever gig in the States, or third ever gig in the States, which was an incredible experience. And we just seemed to have some real pivotal moments in that room as well. And, we loved the booker at the time, who seemed to put us on every 5 minutes. Every time we passed back through New York, he'd let us come and play, and let us play with some of our favorite bands in there as well. I think we got to support a camp in that venue, which do you know that act, Nina from the Cardigans?
Yeah, I know the name Nina from the Cardigans.
So she had a project called A Camp, and I loved that first album. I think when I was maybe 18 or 19, I listened to it until the CD wore out and I had to buy a second one. And is it a 92 cap venue? So getting to stand in the room with her and watch that performance was like, that's one of the greatest things I've ever got to experience.
Wow. I saw Tommy Stinson there with maybe about 10 other people.
It's I think those are my favorite. I think when I think back to all my favorite types of shows, it's those moments. It's those, like, you're kind of looking around at 10 people and thinking, are we seeing this? And I think that's certainly never had a bad moment in Union Hall.
Oh, great. No, I love that venue. They have bocce, Jeff, just so you know, they have bocce courts up front on top of and I was in a bocce league for like 3 years. So I play every Saturday. I was playing bocce there.
This does not surprise me about you. I can so easily picture it.
Great game. Up top, bocce, below venues. I'm sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, it's like party in the front, business in the back, or whatever they say mullet is. Rocky, your music, I'm so excited to talk to you because, one of the goals of our show is to bring bands to people's mind that possibly didn't get the recognition that they deserved. And your band, I listen to, I swoon over it. I'm a big fan. I have to confess. My first question for you is, you seem like the kind of person who can just by ear spot the difference between a Moog and a Juno 106 and a Nordlied 2.
I hope so. Unless you've got a test for me to do, in which case I'll probably fail. But yes, I've been, and I think the older I've got, the more I've realized there's an obsessive part of my personality in that regard, of just seeking sounds and almost I actually think I've got one of the weakest ears of all the people I work with, but I think in terms of sonics and tones and filters with regards to synthesizers, I can pick them out, and I have a ridiculous collection of all of those things you've mentioned and more because of the little differences in them. And I think that, I don't know, the first time I heard one, it's just like it sparked something in me. I grew up as a little snotty punk rock kid who just thought that synthesizers weren't music, and that if it wasn't a distorted guitar, you shouldn't be doing it. And the first time I heard an analog synth in person, or a theremin, it just like physically nearly knocked me over. And from there, I just have been obsessing forever. And those little textures and differences, I think they lead to different emotions and different emotional responses. So I love obsessing over that stuff.
Now, you stepped right into it. You nailed the segue. So thank you for following the script.
Excellent.
there is in Oppenheimer's music, there is that distorted driving guitar sometimes. So my question for you is, when this project at its inception, when you first launched the band and started creating music, was it a synth first priority, or was the guitar, how did you balance those two parts of the equation?
That's really interesting, actually. I think guitars have just been so ever present and for both of us that they were always going to be there. But certainly the initial concept was it's synthesizers. We both, Sean had played in another band and I had recorded some tracks with him, which is how we got to know each other a bit better. And we were kind of like Stereolab were a huge chatting point initially. So, we were talking a lot about them and a few other like European acts, and it definitely was, let's play synths together. And then we tracked a few ideas and I spent a bit of time working on those. And I think it's that gradual thing of like, oh, we'll just add a guitar here. We'll add a guitar here. And then, it's sort of both sides of my brain almost, are being fed simultaneously. And I think all my favorite acts ever, they have a synth, they have a distorted guitar, and they come together. And I think there's an energy in that as well that like pan muting a guitar or kicking on a distortion pedal just blows things open. So we probably started leaning on that more and more as time went by. I'd love to be in a synth project that doesn't have a guitar, but I don't think it hasn't happened yet. And every time it nearly happens, a guitar comes in the equation. So.
It's an addiction. Yeah.
Yeah, that is what all of this is. I think it's like a pretty healthy addiction.
As long
now
as
you
keep
mentioned
it healthy.
You mentioned Sean. How did you and Sean meet? Sean is the other half of Oppenheimer.
Sean had been around. Sean's like a good few years older than me. Sean was in like a really cool band in the late 90s or mid to late 90s from Belfast called Backwater, and they had released like a load of albums on a cool label from London and done loads of Peel sessions and toured loads. And I have an older brother, and he was out at gigs when I was 9 or 10 years old, and he was coming home with like, Backwater singles and playing them to me. And so I was really aware of who they were before I'd ever met Sean. And then they turned into another band called Torcas Valley Reds, who were like a really cool indie rock band. And I recorded a few tracks with them. And just through that, got to talking about, wouldn't it be cool if we tried this, or do you like that? And we actually went to see, do you know the Album Leaf?
I recognize that name, yes.
Kind of like nice, beautiful post-rock indie ambient. I think he had a bunch of Icelandic people in his band at that point. We went to see them in our local pub at the end of my street, and maybe had too many beers, and we're like, we can do this. We could definitely do what he's doing. Let's try it. And that was on a Saturday. And I'm a big believer, if you get drunk and make promises, you've got to see them through. So on Monday, I think he came round to my house, and we just started like throwing out an idea. The first track we wrote together is called Alan Died April 5, which is on the debut album. And we laid it out. I did a load of stuff. I remember then, I think that was the Monday. And on the Friday, I went round to his house and I had it on a CDR, and he put it in his DVD player into his TV. And I just remember thinking, he's going to hate this. This is just like, there was nothing left of what we'd started. And I played it to him, and he loved it. And we went back to the pub again. And then the next day we started doing more stuff, and that became like quite a sort of regular occurrence. It was a really nice sort of, it was my first jump into really doing that. I'd come through as a live sound engineer, and I'd been around a lot of musicians, but I wasn't confident enough to play someone my ideas at that point. So it was this brilliant sort of growing up for me, where all of a sudden someone liked my ideas and they had better ideas to add to my ideas, and we had this collaborative thing. I think a lot of I've worked since before then and since then with so many artists making albums, and quite a lot of the time there's like collaborative problems where people don't click or they have different stylistic ideas. And I just felt so lucky with Oppenheimer that Sean and I's favorite and best times were in the studio alone making music. That was like the greatest feeling and experience I think I've ever had.
Wow.
Off of that first record, would you say that Breakfast in NYC was the song that kind of catapulted you into some sort of a spotlight?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's funny. I with like I was saying just before we started, I think that I've just moved out of one of my recording or out of my mixing studio, and I found a stack of old CDs, and one of them was the very first demo, and Breakfast in NYC is the first track, and we sent that around, just a few friends. There was a promoter friend of ours called Tanya who put on really cool shows in Belfast, and so we sent it to her and we sent it to a few others, and she just bullied us into playing our first show off the back of that song, really. So she just booked a date and said, you're playing in 12 weeks, you're playing a show in Belfast, so you better, because we had never considered that we were a band or that we were ever going to play live. And she did that. It scared the life out of me. As I said, I never really considered myself to be a musician, so the thought of standing on a stage, I'd way rather be backstage or under the stage than on it. And through that, it was a total buzz, just like actually the reaction. We also ended up, there's like a musicians' rights organization in Ireland called IMRO who collect royalties, and they do lots of international work. They also put us on their showcase off the back of that song. And then I took that 3-track CD and sent it to like my 10 favorite record labels, and Bar None were one of those labels. And I don't know if Mark has told this story, and it has stuck with me forever. So they had an intern for the summer, and they gave him a big box of CDs, and he picked us out and went, I hate this, but I think you guys will love this. And it was, which I think is, we got to meet him. Ray is his name, and I'm so grateful that he could recognize it. But I think it's like, I remember chatting to Mark and Glenn at Bar None about it, and they said, as soon as that synth bass kicks in the intro, they were just like, we just have to do something with this. So that song, I genuinely recorded in my spare room with a single bed on its end, with a computer sitting on the top of it, a really bad acoustic guitar, me holding the mic up to Sean because we didn't even have a mic stand at that point. Wow. And then we went to the studio that I worked in. It was like a TV post-production studio, and at nighttime, in exchange for recording lots of different types of bad voiceovers and weird stuff, the owner would let me record music at nighttime. So we went and recorded vocals for that, and I just think this is my favorite thing about music. Like, from that inception of that moment in a crummy spare room, both of our lives changed forever, and not in the not playing arenas or being on top of the pops or anything like that, but like our lives changed course in a positive fashion that has continued every single day to be incredible. And that's like, it's unreal, just for that to be the first track on the first demo that we sent out, to go that far, to end up in television shows and to still sort of pop up in people's consciousness. However many, is it 18 years or more later?
More, right?
More.
Almost 20, right? When did the record come out?
Yeah. So I think it's 19 years this year. 2020. Yeah. Came out in 2006. It's crazy.
Oh my. Yeah. The only thing Mark said about this guy that I'll add is that he was a big stoner. And they didn't know what to do with him, so they stuck him in a corner with a bunch of CDs and just said, listen to it.
Maybe that's an advertisement for something. I don't know. I wasn't going to mention that bit because I didn't know if that's acceptable or not. But yeah, he came to see us. Mark brought him to a show at some point a few years later, after we toured like 20 or 25 times around the States. And I'm just so, I think that is truly something that I still, every artist that I work with or person I write a song with or anything, it's like, you know, make the call, send the email, go to the show, like do the thing that you want to do. Don't sit on your hands and just wait for something to happen. It's like you gotta just, because you never know what's like what little like moment is going to occur if you just give something a try like that. And it, you know, we went very quickly from that, having not played a gig, to putting a record out on a US indie label that we loved, to standing with them, you know, at playing South by Southwest in no time. And it's like fairy tale stuff.
I agree.
As strong as my affinity for Breakfast in New York is, I think my favorite song off of that album is My Son the Astronaut.
Only when your heart is bulletproof, you know you'll be handling the punches quietly. I know you were influenced by movies, watching this is taking you to thinking this is real when happiness is all you know. I should listen to the podcast. I should listen to the podcast. Isolation makes this incomplete. I believe in desperation when you.
I remember that song started with the guitar melody that starts the song, and then the vocal comes off the guitar melody. I wrote that in another spare room somewhere in less than ideal circumstances, and it was in a little pile of like ideas that I had, and it was the second track on that demo EP that I'm talking about. And I remember we sort of messed around with the music for a few days, and it was all really cool, and I was loving it. And then Sean went away. He at the time, Sean was a school teacher in County Down, which like down about maybe 35 miles from Belfast. Every day he would drive down and drive home, and he would write a lot of lyrics and vocals in the car journey. And he called me and was like, I've got it. And we went in and recorded, and his bandmate in that other band that he was in was visiting the studio, and I was just playing it on a set of like, it might be these ones actually. It might, no, it's not these ones, but you know, these sorts of like little old PC speakers or Apple speakers. And I just remember his bandmate Barry going, Sean sounds like he's crying. Like, what is happening in this track? And I was just like, at the time, I was so young. I was just like, I don't know. And again, it's just like emotional connection. We triple tracked his vocal, and that's when I realized that like he's so talented, and there's something so special about the way he sings. He's like an angel. There's a track on that first album called When I Close My Eyes, I Fall in Love, which was a radio DJ friend of ours called Jimmy from the BBC in Northern Ireland came to me after an early show and said, oh, when I close my eyes, I fall in love. And when I open them, Sean's singing. And it is that, like, he's so captivating. And when he had the ability, and he still does, to sing so tightly with himself, it sounds like an effect, but it's just three Seans on top of each other. And that's my, like, massive memory. And that became, like, our opening song of probably, 400, 500 shows every night as the opening act on a load of tours. That's what we started with, because it's cool. And then when it kicks into that first chorus, it's so rewarding. And it was named after, I think Sean named it after a random line in a Spider-Man movie or something. Like, it was just such a nothing little, like, one-liner, My Son the Astronaut. But It's it's probably one of my that's one of my favorite moments ever. I think was his bandmates' reaction to it.
Cool.
Very cool. Very cool. I want to ask you about the song Kate Blanchett.
Yeah.
What? She's one of my favorite actresses, and
There were signs for some gas, food, and lodging. I was dealing with questions I was dodging. What you said, I know you meant it. It brings a total derangement of the senses. Making some calls in the crowded rooms in the halls, we ain't allowed to leave. We were playing a game called Who Am I? You know, in between wars we live and let die.
That's a total Sean song. Actually, I think I only did I write the synth melody in that chorus. We recorded that. We toured with a band called Mosquitoes, who were also on Bar None. There were like Juju, the singer, is Brazilian, and Chris, her husband, I think is from Philadelphia, maybe somewhere around there. So it was like kind of indie pop bossa nova. It was our second tour of the States, and it was second tour. We did our first tour, which was 4 weeks long, and we went home for a week, and then they asked us to come out with them for 7 weeks. And Sean met his wife during that tour. She was in the band. So that it's so weird. I wonder what you think about when you listen to that song, but my visual image of that is Mosquitoes tour van, and this story is just unfolding in the tour van, and it was chaos at times. Like that was such a bonkers tour. They were actually one of the bands that I'd fallen in love with their record Sunshine Barato. I went to. I love a good chat, by the way, so you're really going to get all the details.
Great.
It's an unraveling web often with me, but I went to California when I was young, when Oppenheimer had just started, before we'd even signed a deal with Bar None, because I wanted to be a recording engineer producer, which I've luckily got to do. But I went to California for 6 or 7 weeks to just try and get into the studios that I'd loved the records from. And I remember buying, I think it was either like the Big Takeover or Under the Radar magazine, and reading the review sections, and the Mosquitoes album was in that thing. So I went to Amoeba Music and I bought the album and I listened to it like endlessly. It's why we sent the demo to Bar None in the first place. Like, we love lots of other things on that that have been on Bar None, but that Mosquitoes record just connected with me so much. It was sunny and otherworldly, and it was this escape from Belfast. So to go from there to being on tour with them, for Sean to there's just a few lines in it of just the chaos that was happening, and I think that was possibly Mosquitoes' last tour, and I'm not sure that they properly made it to the end of the tour. So there was an implosion, but there was also this like explosion for Sean happening at that point. Like, it was such a bonkers time, but it's the Who Am I game, it's like, name on your head, who am I? And this person was Kate Blanchett.
Okay, fair enough. Interesting. What is that like, touring for 7 weeks at a clip?
I loved it. I think this is what makes or breaks people who want to do music forever. Is I loved it. I just thought the minute anybody asks you to like put your shoes on and leave your house to play a show, what an honor. And to be, for anyone to want you to travel 3,000 miles to do that.
Yeah.
And to do it every day for 7 weeks I just had the greatest, like my favorite, I keep saying my favorite thing about music, but it's all of it. But it's like truly, it's the connections for me was the best part of touring. It was like the late nights, experiencing like tourist spots at 3 a.m. after you play a show, making friends with promoters or radio DJs or people who came to the gig or other bands. Like I have a wonderful network of friends all across North America because, either we slept on their sofa or they put our band on or we played at their radio station. And that was magical for me. So every single day was a new opportunity to see something you probably haven't seen, and in a way that not very many people get to experience it. I love traveling. It sort of keeps me happy and excited, and to be asked to travel, and for people to, whether that's buying your dinner, buying your record, paying you a show fee, letting you sleep in their house. It's just such a fantastic thing. So the 7-week tour for me, it kind of got to the point quickly for me where if it wasn't 4 weeks, I didn't consider it to be a tour. I considered it to be a few shows. So we did that first year. I think we did like maybe 16, 17 weeks of touring. And then the next year is when it got serious and we actually like really started, we did some, I think we did one from September to December in North America. And, when you leave Belfast, it looks one way. And when you come back, it's like there's a brand new like shopping center or another street has been added. And that I thought that was another great thing to like, because for me, it's about perspectives. And it's like, if you travel in a van across any country and there's this bubble within that van and the relationships within it, but you're getting a little window to the world, and it changes. I think it's especially important, to leave your country and to see other countries in the world. I think that's so important and something historically in Northern Ireland that I think many people have never done, and it would help immensely if they could see those other perspectives. Because if you're in outside a restaurant in a small town in Montana at 9 o'clock at night and you're begging with them to make you grilled cheese before they close up, you're so far away from the inner workings of your country at that moment. And I think that was it for me. It just renewed. Every day was like a new adventure, a chance to meet people, play songs for people, buy music, buy musical instruments, or just see another city. It's like another like little dot on the roadmap. It's so cool. I don't think I ever want to tour again. But I for those like 7 years of that and a few other things, because I pretty much had been touring with bands from I was like 16. So every single experience is just still, and of course there were moments like I can't lie to you and say that every single second of it was amazing. Like we had a couple of just chaotic moments in the middle of that where, maybe we didn't act as kindly to each other or to our touring party as we should have, or, too many beers. We were fond of blasting air horns at each other at funny moments, and maybe I was the most fond of that. So it led to a couple of situations that were incredibly stressful at times, but I think that the good always outweighed those sort of little things for me. I think quite an interesting viewpoint on all of that, which is like none of touring is a sacrifice. Like, it's an opportunity. It's a really incredible thing to get to do. Like not very many people get to experience life like that. So I've never taken it as oh, you can't have security, or you can't go on holiday, or you can't do it. Like, that's never factored in for me. It's always been, you get to do this. Like, it's some of the places we got to experience, like the West Coast of America, just seeing some of those, like, and for me, it's nearly always, it's like after the show, it's like, I remember we played in Missoula, Montana, and it was in the university, and we went to a diner, Sean and I, and we drove up to the diner, and as we were driving, like maybe 60 deer just shot across the road in front of us. I've never seen the like of it in my life, and it was just like no one else has experienced. I'm sure someone's experienced very similar, but right in that moment, it was just like, this is happening. And it's those, like, I have thousands of those little memories. So I'm always just searching for a new adventure.
Wow. Good for you.
There's a lot of joy in your music that maybe is missing from some of your contemporaries. And I hear it all throughout. It's not isolated to one album or one song. It's just kind of an outlook.
It's a default. It totally is. I think
Hearts don't listen, even when we need them. People shouldn't trust it, but we need the feeling. When the heart knows something, but the brain is feeling missing. When your heart dictates it, forget about the silence. The letters we write, the feelings we hide, the pictures we fake when we want to feel safe. They are clouding our minds, are clouding our eyes, are clouding our lives. When the lights are on but nobody's home, hearts don't listen.
it's interesting. I have a project at the moment that I'm working with a friend from Dublin, and his default is really dark, really sad, difficult music. So we've done volume 1 where he's done that, and I've worked on it with him and I've loved it. And now we're in volume 2, which is actually, it's going to be okay. It's going to be really good in the future. And he's called me at the weekend and said, I've got no ideas for this project. And I'm like, this is my time to shine. This is like, by default, when I sit down and start just where my hands fall on a synth, it's happy. It's major key. It's optimism and it's hope. And I think that that definitely shines through. It definitely shines through in the music and just in the way that I make music and interact with people, and the kind of the spin that I'll put on any situation is like, we can do this, or we should do this, or let's try this. And I think that's I think that really sums up Oppenheimer for me. It sums up our the reason we got together. Our first bio was like, we just want to tour tiny towns in America and put out, our music on a cool indie label. And that's exactly what we got to do. So I think if you like just a good attitude, it's like, it's so easy to think of all the reasons why you can't do something, but it takes the same amount of time to just get it done. So,
what a healthy perspective.
We need to clone Rocky.
Exactly. Listen up, people. Listen up.
Yeah. There was, you mentioned long stretches of touring. There was a pretty intense leg of that tour with They Might Be Giants. And I think that you kind of concluded that tour and that arc of the band and went in to start. And correct me if I have the timeline wrong. But that They Might Be Giants tour sort of preceded the work on Take the Whole Mid-Range and Boost It. And Take the Whole Mid-Range and Boost It feels, if the first record was quirky and experimental, that second record is that times 10. I feel like you guys were really comfortable with yourselves, maybe a little bit dancier, a little bit synthier, but it's still Rocky and Sean.
Yeah, I think that playing those, playing hundreds of shows, and I love the first record, but I spent quite a while in my 20s quite embarrassed by just how, lo-fi it is, and because that was me learning how to make records and how to experiment and find things, whereas I think we really cracked it. We played all the shows, we'd felt reactions, we'd felt songs move, we had written songs and toured them, and then recorded them, and we got to do it in lots of different locations. Kate Blanchett was recorded in Jersey City with John Marshall Smith, who was in Mosquitoes, and then brought back to Belfast. And the Never Never from that record, which has Matt from the Bronx on it, we got his vocals back the day before we left for the tour with They Might Be Giants, actually. So we ended up finishing that in Portland in a cool studio, and Sean, I'm writing the vocals on the way to the studio, which was really cool for Sean's parts. And it was definitely that, I think, is my favorite time ever. And I was talking about how we were very, collaboratively like locked with each other. Making Take the Whole Mid-Range and Boosted is the greatest like creative experience I've ever had with anyone. It was just flying out of us. We had actually started and pretty much finished it before the first tour with They Might Be Giants. They had it's funny you asked about the name Oppenheimer as well. It was we played a show in Dublin, and a friend of They Might Be Giants' manager had seen the show and sent a photo to him, and he just finished reading the Oppenheimer biography, and he was like, "Oh, that's interesting. They're called Oppenheimer. They're on Bar None. They Might Be Giants used to be on Bar None. I'm going to check this out." And so he asked us to come to New York to play one show, and we didn't know at the time, but it was a test to see if the band liked us and they thought they could put up with us for a long period of time, and I hope they did in the end. But that was like we got that call when we just started making the Take the Whole Mid-Range and Boosted. We were about 3 weeks into it, and the guy called and said, "Do you want to come to New York and play?" We played at the Bowery Ballroom with them, and that's when I think that was a massive moment. I had been managing the band myself up until that point, and was still really young, and even more energetic. But I felt lost. So that was a beautiful moment of like, whoa, this is we played the gig. And then the next day we went to see them. They live up, their office was up in Nyack, and they sat us down and said, "Well, we can offer you this show." And it was like, I can't remember how many dates it was, but it was everywhere. And that, all of that. So we would do like 5 to 6 days in the studio, and then we'd like go to Scotland and play a festival and come back again the next day and go back into recording. It's where my studio is now, in a place called the OEM Music Centre in Belfast, which is like a really cool 3-story warehouse hub. It has a venue, a music exhibition. It teaches kids how to be promoters. It has a music college in there. There's managers, guitar techs, festivals, and there's a little studio tucked away that was built in the 1970s. And we took a lease on that studio for 3 months to make Take the Whole Mid-Range and Boost It. And I never left. I've just stayed in the studio since then. So it was a really cool experimental time. We got to record a drum kit for every song on that album in a different room in the building. So there's a song called Support Our Truths on that album where we put Sean in the old like service elevator. I guess it's just like a big metal thing with shutters. We just opened the doors, put him in the lift, and just put the mics out in this massive warehouse space. It's there. I can hear all the rooms in the building on that album as it goes through. So it was such an open, like, free time. Like some of the, there's a couple of tracks, Sean was asleep on like 2 office chairs, just like upside down, and I'm working on a vocoder part. It's 5 a.m, and when he wakes up, he's delighted that like, yeah, we got it. Or like he just like come up with like the first track on that album, Major Television Events, is just bonkers. Like it's only about a minute and a half long, and it twists and turns, and there's a big whistle at the end, which is him in the 3-story stairwell in the building. And the whole time I had no idea what was happening, and he was like, just trust me, this is going to be unreal. And it was. I just
Should I be concerned with major television events? Or what about the money that I've taken and spent? I'm in the middle of a very weird descent. I wanna take you down, take you down, take you somewhere that you feel you belong, where your feet are never dragging along. There ain't no doubt on whether this is right or wrong. I wanna break you down, break you down, break you out of this self-made tiny cocoon. We'll have to aim high and aim high if we're ever gonna shoot the moon, shoot the moon, shoot the. I'll hand you over to the local police. You're getting sort of friendly with the nearly deceased. My medication is an honest slow release. I wanna shake you down, shake you down, shake you down, shake you down, shake you down.
and that was like such a big moment for me as well, because it was like, right, I'm gonna open a studio. I'm just gonna do it. And I used to look up to, and I still do, like, but at that point, I was looking up to like Larry, who runs Shackpot in Portland, or Steve Albini, or like the Discord studios in DC, and looking at them and going, wow, those guys have been open for like 5, 10, 15 years.
Right.
Like what, they're like real studios. And now I think I'm hitting 18 years this year with Start Together being open. And that's the moment, like that is, I can pinpoint it all to making that record. It was just such a creatively rewarding experience, and to get that, it was funny hearing you say that thing about like, I can't remember how you put it, but like, maybe not like fulfilling our sort of ability, or like people not clicking or us not doing enough, but like getting, I think that's something I talk a lot about to artists, is like getting to make that album is like, we're so lucky that happened and that it felt the way it did. And I often say that sometimes because the music industry can be unfair to artists sometimes, I think, and that I've been friends with a lot of people who've made some incredible records and they've never got released, or they haven't sort of got the rewards that I thought they deserved. But nothing can ever take that incredible experience away of like making the record and being in the room. So it's such an important part of kind of the foundations of who I've become as a proper growing up.
Vastly overrated, by the way.
Wildly overrated.
Wildly overrated.
Don't I know it? I'm effectively just hiding.
Peter Pan syndrome all day long, for sure. I would love to hear a little bit about the Blue Rose.
That's interesting. Why?
Well, I'm glad you asked why. I think today in 2025, we can contextualize a lot of the sounds that we hear you play with in the soundscape. I think that there are some people that would listen to it and say that's chiptune, or whatever's happening with. There's a really cool band from Chicago called I Fight Dragons. And they come out and they've got a guitar and they've got a bass and they've got a guy playing a Nintendo Game Boy. And you're like, hang on, that doesn't quite fit. And it's plugged into a synth and it's, very, very intricately synced. You're looking outside of their traditional instrumentation to find your sounds, I think, in that song specifically.
Yeah, that's so cool. Thank you.
We live for coded messages. There is a code in everything. There is a mode of messaging. We live for coded messages. There is a code in everything. There is a mode of messaging. see roses show into the turned up the bells you told and told to expose. And then they're stitching the shoes to alter just more than clothes, while nearby people walk out windows to waste dark white flowers. I see roses show.
We it's so weird after so long. That song nearly didn't make the record, and many people in our sort of wider team didn't want it to be on the record for that very reason. They were like,
Really?
we don't, you know, there were 3 other songs that didn't make the record that, and people wanted those on. And one of the leading BBC journalists in Ireland reviewed the album, loved the entire album, hated that song, and was like, this is the low point of the record. But the point, what you've just said is exactly why we put it on the record. It was a chance to just twist the sonic palette and to turn people from one side to the next side, in a way that none of the other songs did. And that's exactly, it was the second last song we wrote for it, for that exact spot on the album. And I haven't listened to it in a really long time. I must give it another listen. But yeah, it's got a very odd sound palette. And I don't know if, I'm not saying we were ahead of our time, because we definitely weren't. But maybe people just couldn't, you know, it was maybe just too much for them at that moment as well. But I'm so glad we did put it on there, because for me, the flow of an album, you know, if we swapped that for a different song, the record would have felt different. We wouldn't have been ready for the next side, and it's cool. But yeah, that's probably like our least popular, you know, most hated song possibly, which it's so interesting.
Yeah,
and that's another thing.
Got here. I love it. I love that song.
That's so cool. I think that's another great thing, is like, you never know what that song means to certain, you know, to people, you know. So it how a journalist reviewer feels about it in that moment, they themselves can change their mind about that, you know, for better or worse sometimes as well. But that's so cool.
Rocky, I have to confess that my favorite Oppenheimer release is This Racket Takes Its Toll. And there's a little bit of sadness in that statement, in that, if my understanding is correct, that's a compilation of cobbled together, you know, maybe B-sides and like an EP from here and an incomplete piece over here. And you made an album out of bits and pieces, but the promise for what would have come next for your group is extraordinarily. And honestly, some of the songs on that, Simple Syllable Colors is one of my favorite songs maybe ever.
Wow. Oh, that's really cool, because obviously our whole deal was like, let's write songs that are no more than 2.5 minutes long, and is it like 6 or 9 minutes or something?
It's almost 8.
Is it almost 8? There you go.
Yeah.
It's and that was a cool experience making that, and that was just us, you know, kind of going, okay, I love short songs, make people listen again, make a statement, move to the next part. But that one, obviously I love kind of longer form post-rock music, or like sort of into prog or experimental guitar music as well. So it's but I must say, most of it came from Sean. Sean had the concept again, and we recorded that. We started that in Belfast and finished it. Our friend Tim from the band Ash used to live in New York and had a studio called Atomic Heart there, and we recorded most of that just in between shows in New York. And that experience was really cool, like wintertime in New York, and jumping into like those layers and the twists and turns and the chaos. There's some incredible layers and noises that go into the twists of that song. I think it, I've been bubbling and buzzing all over you for this entire chat, but I do think it's really sad that we didn't get to like complete the concept of what that record was. It was just a stress and timing sort of scenario that just meant we didn't get to finish a record. But Single Syllable Colors was like, I do think a good, I think we recorded 12 or 13 songs and we released 6 on that record from those sessions. Some of the ones that didn't make it were unreal, but they weren't finished, or they were on their way to paving it. And so they didn't make it. There was a couple of tracks of, there was one track of Sean's in particular that's just like unreal, but it wouldn't have sat well on the EP as a result of that. So yeah, I think that's the other thing is like, bands break up, lives change, things move, things get tricky, you succumb to stresses at times, and that's, I think it's true of every kind of avenue of life, but it happened to us at that moment, and I think that I'm really glad we got to actually put some of those tracks out there, because it was like a nice bit of like, here's where we started and here's where we stopped. But I would have loved to have, I was very excited about making that third record, and I think we were probably about 2/3 of the way through making it, but it was going to take a lot longer to, I think that we played everybody what we thought the record was, and for the first time ever we sort of had feedback saying we don't think the record's finished, we need more tracks, and we just weren't in a position to spend another sort of 10 months writing and recording. Just sort of real life had bounced up and got in the way a little bit, so it just meant that we couldn't dedicate ourselves. And if you haven't realized already from my personality in this chat, is like, I'm everything or nothing, so it's like, it's do it all day every day, or else like do something else. So that was the moment where we'd done a load of cool shows around Ireland supporting a band called Bell X1, who are like big numbers in Ireland. We were sort of playing Dublin to like 2,000 people, and just over the course of that week we just started chatting about like, does this feel the way we thought it should feel? Are you having fun? Is this like, is this what we want to be doing? And we just sort of made the call that we, Sean had moved to New York at that point, so we just sort of made the call and went, just go back to New York and I'll just start making records with everybody else, and that was that. And then such a cool thing as well, that thing I talked about, like send the demo, take the tour, do the thing.
Right.
We had that chat and we were like, right, okay, this is cool, this feels okay, we'll do our last few shows, we'll say goodbye to everybody, we'll thank everybody. And then that was in the music center where my studio is, and we had the chat outside the toilets on the sofa in the little corridor. It was really glamorous. And then we walked into the main venue, and the band Snow Patrol had announced like a massive hometown show for the following summer. Like, I think it was the biggest show in the history of Northern Ireland. Like, it was however many thousand people. And this Gary, the singer, was like, I want you guys to open the show. I was like, thanks. And then like, I went to see them that night. They were playing in Belfast, and I just chatted to Nathan, who plays guitar for them. I was just like, listen, thanks so much for that, but we can't play that show. And it was like, that's one of those moments of like, I wonder what would have happened if we had been offered that show like 30 minutes earlier. Would it have like, and I think sometimes being in an indie pop band or an indie rock band, you're living moment to moment. It's like, I remember we played just one of the most surreal gigs I've ever been involved with, on St. Patrick's night in the Viper Room on Sunset. And we were supporting, was it Boom Bip, Griff Reese from Super Furry Animals. Is that what that was called? It was like a concept album about DeLorean cars, and which were built in Belfast as well. So it was a really weird St. Patrick's night. The DeLoreans were outside. We had one of the worst shows of our lives. We got in a massive argument with our front of house sound guy, who was like my mentor from Belfast that we toured with forever. He drove off in the van and we didn't see him until the next day. We were like just torn apart by how bad the experience was, and we got in the van and we didn't really speak to each other for a bunch of days. And we arrived in Colorado and we'd been through the mountains. We'd no phone signal, and we got a call from our manager being like, oh, the publishing company were at the show at the Viper Room. And I was like, oh no. And our manager was like, they loved it and they want to give you a publishing deal. And it gave us enough money to like get back across America, pay off all our debts, keep the band going. And it's those little moments of like, if we had got to Colorado and nobody called, I don't know what would have happened. You know, we might have just all beat each other unconscious or walked away. So it's those little moments of like, and I see it now, you know, so much with artists that I work with. It's like, you just got to keep believing in the thing that you're doing until you absolutely decide that, well, do you know what? If it's not for you at that moment anymore. And I think that's where we arrived at with Take a Whole Mid-Range and Boost It. With This Racket Takes Its Toll. It was just like, it just doesn't feel like the best thing to do to continue right at this moment. But I'm glad we got to pull those songs together, and the title of that album as well is it's a line from a song by Les Savy Fav. And I just thought it was nice to just pull that in there. So it's kind of like, it just works on multiple levels. I think I used to get really sad when bands split up. I used to be like, so there's a band, I don't know if you remember a band from Chicago called The Like Young, who were around 2006 or before that, because they were a huge influence on me. We played with them in 2006. And by the time we got back to New York, they'd split up. And I remember just being so sad. And then after I toured for like 2 years, I was like, yeah, it's like nothing takes it away. Nothing takes their records away, takes the tours away, takes those experiences. Like they live in the sort of minds and the experiences of the people who got to be them. So that sort of keeps me happy.
Sure. You mentioned your sound guy. Is this the guy who worked with Thin Lizzy?
Yeah, he was around in those days. He actually, I saw him. He helped me move I have this massive old mixing desk, so he was helping me like unscrew 300 screws from that, and he was going, oh, Phil Lynott still owes me £15 for whatever, and I'm just like, this. I hear this story every time I see him, and he came from like he's like, he must be pushing like 70 at this point, and he has been mixing bands from he was 15, and through that sort of era. I've been talking a lot about him actually recently, because that era and the behaviors and the aggression and intensity that was there is thankfully not a part of most modern touring these days, because it was brilliant and amazing. I'm so grateful for him. He put a lot out for my band as well. Like, he not only trained me how to mix shows, he paid for our trip to New York to play with They Might Be Giants as a tester. When we didn't have money in our account, he didn't get paid for a year until we got our publishing deal. He put so much on the line for us. But my favorite stories about him are, he did sound for Radiohead when they played Belfast on the eve of OK Computer's tour. And I was at that show as a school kid. My brother got me tickets, and it was one of the greatest gigs I've ever seen. But apparently he made Tom York cry that day because he called him Buckethead. That's just the nature of him. It doesn't matter who it is he's in front of, or like the amount of shows we played. Like, we'd go to South by Southwest and we'd be like, Jerry, please be on your best behavior. And he would somehow just gravitate towards the most important person in the room. and just say something ridiculous or do something. We have a song called "Fireworks Are Illegal" in the state of New Jersey, and that was he bought 300 like rocket firework things in a big box, and he set them off on the boardwalk in Atlantic City on a Friday night at 7 o'clock, and he was just surrounded by police. Within like the fireworks were still going off, and he was surrounded, and we'd all legged it at this point, and we're like hiding and like peeping up over the horizon, and they chatted to him, and they were like, do you want to spend a night in the cells? And he was like, oh, maybe it might be a better option than touring with these guys. And, the police just didn't, I think they thought he was just like a drunk old Irish guy. So they gave him a big like bin bag. And I'm not sure if I'm using Irish words or American words for things, but so a big bin bag. And they just sent him around the beach to pick up all the empty beer bottles because they thought it was his beer bottles, but they weren't. And then we wrote the song off the back of a lot of his antics. Like, he was the one on tour who was like, and then 2 days later we get to Jersey City and he's handing out fireworks to the people in the pub, and like I'm staying with my friend down the street and I could just hear fireworks going off like right there in the center of Jersey City, and I'm like, I know it's him. I just know he's doing this. And it was him. And like every crazy, like I can't even think of my top 10 mad experiences with him, but it just, and we pushed him.
Okay.
I was actually chatting to someone about it recently. We played a show in Bath, which is a beautiful old city in the southwest of England. It's gorgeous. And Sean and I told Jerry that we were going to sell merch after the show. So we waited in the van for us, and we were just drinking with bands and watching stuff that we loved. And we fell out of the club at like 3 a.m. We hadn't set up the person that we were staying with. We never called him because we got drunk, and Jerry had to drive us around all night with nowhere to stay. and like he's a good, I don't know how much older, like 25, 30 years older than me. So he didn't say anything. He put up with our chaos. And the next night he got 10 times drunker than us. And like we were staying with the brother of the guy who ran our label in England. And like, I can't ever speak to any of them again. It was just so embarrassing. And he did it to teach us a lesson. Like so many nights, so many nights he would just take it all in and then just unleash like so strong, and such an amazing character, and didn't make for a good stable touring party, but made for some of the best. And like a lot of the times people remember Jerry before they'd remember us when we came back to a venue, if we like rolled back through a city. Plus, he was the grumpiest sound man in the history of the world. So no matter how bad of a venue you went into, he was going to win. And what often happened was they'd realize, like the grumpy local guy would realize that Jerry was the same as him, and they'd bond, and then they'd both make fun of us. But we got the shows done as a result. It was, and he could mix, like his mixes were just unreal. Like they were so good, we were getting in trouble with headline bands a lot of times because we just, like, he was nailing it. So it was a great, he is like, those are the sorts of characters that need to, in some ways, continue in music, because it's not like that anymore on tours.
No, I would imagine. He's still around then?
He's still around. He's at large, but he hasn't made a band cry in a good few years
that you know of.
That I know of. But sometimes if I'm like, say I'm in the studio and there's a band from Ireland in, he might come up in conversation and they'll be like, he told me I couldn't play drums, or he told me my drums sounded like this, or he did this to me. And I'm just like, he's still doing it. It's just like, he's still giving a piece of himself to music. It's amazing. He just doesn't care what anybody thinks.
God bless him.
Strong.
God bless him.
Rocky, are you, do you have a dialogue with Sean? Are you in touch?
Yeah, here and there. I'd asked him about this, and he just is he's not as like immersed in music as I am these days. I've been it's interesting as well. I can't really speak on his behalf, but it feels like Oppenheimer was like the start of everything for me, just at like the start of my journey, and I've just sort of been becoming more and more relentless, and I don't think it's quite the same for him. So it's kind of, that was then for him, and now he's doing what he does. So it's but yeah, we actually bumped into each other because he lives in New York, but we bumped into each other in our local supermarket in Belfast a couple of years ago before I was going to New York for the summer. And we sort of chat back and forth as and when stuff pops up, or like one of us will be like, we'll remember something very small and we'll message the other person and go, where was this? Did this happen? Was this a real thing? And we'll try and figure out what city we were in, or what moment it was, or where we were. And we've done a few. We did one, it was a good few years ago now, but we did like a kind of retrospective thing for the BBC in Ireland, where Sean was in New York and I was in Belfast, and they hooked us up on radio. And we did like a radio thing that was really cool. And they played lots of session tracks from different festivals around the UK that we'd done, which was really cool. But we always had said, it's like, never go back. There's a Simpsons quote about like, forwards not backwards, upwards not forwards, and it's like, it's that for us, is like, don't go back, like go do something new, or like make way. I'm a big believer in that as well. It's like, make way for new artists. I've sort of jumped the gun here and I'm just chopping off are we ever going to do it again? So it's like, make way for new artists, like, and I think there's been a few acts, like one of my favorite bands of all time is Sleater Kinney, and my studio was named after one of their songs. And when they got back together with a new album to surprise everybody, it was like one of the greatest moments ever. And I've seen them a few times since then, and I'm so grateful that I've got to see them again. But they're probably one of the only acts I can think of where I'm like, I'm glad they, I always think it's amazing that a band can get back together and play shows, and people can get to experience that, and they get to keep doing it. But I'm just such a believer in renewal, and it's like my favorite thing is new music and new experiences. So I really get a lot from like hearing an artist that I've never heard from the first time, or doing that. So it's I'm always like, what's next in that regard. But we we haven't been in the same room. Like COVID and lockdowns and all that sort of carry on really put such a huge dent in all of that. I think it was like the last time we were in a room together, I think it was about 2022 maybe, or 3.
Okay.
But I love your ear. I love the music that you are making with other artists. The Slomatics album, and so I watch you from afar. You're cranking out fantastic sounding records, and if it were not cost prohibitive, I would fly my band over and track with you. I love what your studio's putting out. But hearing you say that there are some maybe unfinished Sean songs out there, there's some unfinished Oppenheimer stuff in the bottom of a closet somewhere, hope springs eternal, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd love to see those songs out there. I think I'm also not massively precious about things in that sense either. It's just like because you do that thing where you worry in the moment, you worry that it's not good enough or it's not complete, and then a few years pass and you're like, what was I worried about? It's like, it's great. So I have a good filter for just being like, when it's done, get it out there. It's interesting. I must go back and listen to maybe they're not as good as I thought they were, and there was a good solid reason for it, but there were at least 3 like Sean songs like that he had brought in that I just thought were like incredible, just like really and that was the thing that I was going to say there is like, even though like we might not be in contact super often, or we might have just like our lives have sort of gone off in different directions, like I'm so grateful for the opportunity of like being in a room with him to also help nurture his ideas as well, because he up till that point he had been the drummer in a lot of like bands, but he had never been the person who brought the songs and wrote the melodies and really connected the ideas. So it was a wonderful time to do that, and I'm so grateful that he was like that good at what he did in that regard, because like I never would have got to do anything if it wasn't for that. So I feel so lucky that we got to do that together. But yeah, I'll send you a link and just give you all the songs.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
Thank you for spending an hour with us, Rocky. This has been fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to me. I love chatting. So you've really you've made everybody in my house happy for an hour.
Well, we love listening, so I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Great music. Really, I hope this episode opens people's ears to something that they didn't know before. It's like Jeff Lynne joined the Rentals. It's just fucking fantastic.
Good analogy. On that note, we will go ahead and part ways and then hit end.
Yeah.
Many thanks to Rocky for taking the time to chat with us. Extra special thanks to Mark at Bar None Records for making it happen.
This episode of Centre Stage was written and produced by Keith R. Higgins and Jeff Calhoun. The show was recorded at Thunderlove Studio, where it was engineered by
Daphne Morris,
with help from
Penetration,
edited by
Vic Titball,
with help from
Clem Fandango.
Our theme song is Cynical by Jaguar on Mars. You can stream Jaguar on Mars wherever you stream your favorite music. The songs you heard during this podcast were Breakfast in New York City, My Son, the Astronaut, Kate Blanchett, Hearts Don't Listen, Major Television Events, and The Blue Rose. You can stream Oppenheimer wherever you stream your favorite music. Please remember to support independent music.
original music by Mike Pellegrino.
If you like what you've heard, please remember to subscribe and leave us a rating. It helps other people find the podcast. Thanks for listening.
Grazie.
Bailey Leaf,
Rob Janicki, Mike Pellegrino, Farina Vella,
S.W. Loudon,
Michael Janicki, Peyton Janicki.
This show's executive producer is Lulu McGillicuddy and is in the loving memory of
Lucas Thunderlow.
And now, until we meet again next time, I remain as always obediently yours.
Abandoned Albums is a production of Paw Print Media.